I hadn't seen Malia in almost 6 years when she messaged me out of the blue. It was just a casual, "Hey stranger," on Facebook Messenger. One of those pings you ignore unless it comes from someone who meant something once. And she had. We worked together fresh out of college, same department, same frustrations with terrible bosses, same after-hours drinks where we vented about life. I always liked her. Smart, kind of chaotic, but funny as hell. "Leon," she wrote. "You around? Just wanted to catch up. No pressure. My name's Leon Carter. I'm 32 now, living just outside Portland, Oregon. Work in graphic design, have a condo with a small guest room I barely use, and a quiet life I built intentionally after my 20s got too loud. We met up that Friday at a quiet bar. The conversation started light. Old co-workers, stupid office memories, the usual 'where are you now' routine. She looked tired, like sleep had been skipping her for weeks, but she still laughed the same way I remembered, full-bodied and contagious. Then, just as I was getting ready to settle the check, she lowered her eyes and whispered, "I don't want to go home tonight." I blinked. "You okay?" She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Yeah, I lost my job 2 weeks ago, and things at my brother's place are weird. I've been couch hopping. I'm just tired, Leon. I'm so tired." She didn't cry, not yet, but I could see her shaking. "You want to come stay at my place?" I asked. "I won't be in the way," she said, almost instantly. "Just one night. I just need somewhere I can sleep without people yelling." It was close to midnight when we got to my place. I made tea, mostly to give her something warm to hold. She sat on the couch like it was foreign territory, legs pulled up beneath her. "You okay with the guest room?" I asked, handing her the mug. She didn't answer right away. Would it be weird if I stayed in your room?" I don't want to be alone right now." I hesitated, not because I didn't trust her, but because I wasn't sure what she meant. She caught that and added, "Nothing weird. I just want to not feel like a ghost for a few hours." So I let her in. She curled up on the far edge of the bed, fully clothed, clutching one of the extra pillows like it was a lifeline. I lay next to her, unsure of the rules. We talked a little. Her family had cut her off after a blow-up with her sister. The job loss wasn't her fault, layoffs, but she'd been taking it like a personal failure. Somewhere between 1 a.m. and dawn, our conversation faded into silence. And then she turned toward me and whispered, "Do you ever just need to feel human again?" Before I could answer, she kissed me. It wasn't wild or heated. It was quiet, slow, like reaching for a light switch in the dark. I didn't stop her. I didn't want to. We never talked about deciding to cross that line. It just happened, like the next breath after a long, held-in sigh. In the morning, she was still there, tangled up in the sheets, and I didn't regret a thing. But I knew everything was about to get complicated. It was a Saturday morning when Malia called me. I was still in bed, scrolling through my emails with one hand and trying to convince myself to get up when the phone buzzed. I didn't expect it to be her. We had been texting on and off since that night. Mostly light, friendly, nothing too deep. She hadn't stayed again after that first night, but we'd seen each other a couple of times for coffee or lunch. Things felt tentative, like we were both afraid to name what had happened. "Hey," I answered. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. "I need to tell you something," she said, voice shaky. I sat up. "What's going on?" "I'm pregnant, Leon." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My mind blanked like it had been wiped clean with one sentence. "I found out a few days ago," she added quickly. "And before you say anything, I'm keeping it." I swallowed. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure. I didn't plan this, obviously, but I've been thinking a lot and I want to do this. With or without you." Her voice was firm, but I could hear something behind it. Fear, maybe. Or hope she didn't want to admit to. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even scared. I was just stunned. After a long silence, I asked, "You think it's mine?" "Yes. I haven't been with anyone else in over a year." I let that sit. "Well," I said finally, "I'm not going to walk away from this." She exhaled, and I realized she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "I don't know what this means for us," I added. "But if there's going to be a kid, I want to be there. I want to help." Over the next few weeks, we started figuring things out. Doctor's appointments, prenatal vitamins, ultrasounds. I offered to come with her to the first one. She didn't expect me to, but I went. When we heard the heartbeat for the first time, she reached for my hand without even thinking. I didn't let go. We started talking more. Spending time together again. Not in some whirlwind romantic way, more like two people slowly learning how to lean on each other. She'd stay over once in a while, usually falling asleep halfway through a movie on the couch. I started stocking snacks she liked without realizing it. And somewhere along the line, it just felt right. One night, after a prenatal class, we ended up back at my place, both of us sitting on the edge of the bed, laughing about how terrible we were at the breathing techniques. She looked over and said, "I guess we're doing this, huh?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "We really are." And that was the night she asked, not with words, but just by leaning in, if we could start again. Not just as co-parents, but as something more. We weren't rushing into it, but we weren't pretending anymore either. We were in this together now, for better or worse. When our son was born, everything changed. I know that sounds like a cliche, but there's no other way to say it. One minute, I was pacing the hospital hallway, drinking terrible coffee, trying to act like I had everything under control. The next, I was standing beside Malia, staring down at this tiny, red-faced person who had somehow made me feel more terrified and more proud than I'd ever been in my life. He came out screaming. Strong lungs, the nurse said with a grin. Malia was exhausted, drenched in sweat, hair matted to her forehead, but when they laid him on her chest, she started crying. Not from pain, but something deeper. I reached for her hand, and she squeezed it tight. "We have a son," she whispered, voice cracking. "Yeah," I said, barely holding it together. "We do. We named him Caleb." The first few days were a blur, diapers, feedings, cries that came in like alarms. But even through the fog of exhaustion, I felt something new. A sense of purpose I hadn't known I was missing. I wasn't just showing up for Malia anymore. I was showing up for someone who didn't even know who I was yet, but depended on me all the same. Malia stayed at my place after the birth. It wasn't even a conversation, we both just knew it made sense. I set up the guest room as a nursery, bought blackout curtains, a baby monitor, and this weird rocking bassinet thing that cost way too much but somehow kept Caleb asleep longer than anything else. I took time off work. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. I wanted to be there. I made the bottles, changed the diapers, held him at 3 a.m. when he wouldn't sleep. And every time I looked at that kid, I felt like the world had shrunk down to just him, Malia, and me. Malia struggled a bit, especially in the first few weeks. There were nights she'd just sit on the bathroom floor and cry, whispering that she wasn't cut out for this. I didn't try to fix it. I just sat next to her, held her hand, reminded her that she wasn't doing this alone. I started working from home more. Took on fewer clients. The old me, the guy who lived alone, went to happy hours with coworkers, played video games on Saturdays, he disappeared without a fight. I didn't miss him. Caleb started smiling at 2 months. First time he did it, he was staring at the ceiling fan like it was the most amazing thing in the world. I caught it by accident, and when I showed Malia the photo, she burst into tears. A year later, on Caleb's first birthday, I took Malia out to the little trail behind the park where we sometimes walked after putting him in the stroller. She looked tired, as usual, hair in a messy bun, wearing one of my old hoodies. And I'd never seen her look more beautiful. I pulled the ring from my pocket. She gasped. "Are you serious?" I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She covered her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly. I didn't even get through the whole speech I had planned before she whispered, "Yes. God, yes." And right there, under the trees and fading sun, I realized this wasn't what I planned for my life. It was better. Wedding planning brought chaos, but the good kind. Swatches, tastings, emails, guest lists. Malia had a spreadsheet for everything. We argued about seating charts and flower colors like we were debating international politics, and somehow it made me love her more. Her cousin Yara flew in a few weeks before the wedding to help out. I'd only met her once before, sharp, funny, didn't put up with anyone's crap. She and Malia were close growing up, practically sisters. Yara was staying in the guest room, and the house felt fuller with her around. Caleb loved her. Every time she spoke, he'd giggle like she was telling the funniest joke in the world. One Saturday morning, I went out for a jog. Just a short loop around the neighborhood to clear my head. I came back early, entered through the back to avoid waking Caleb, who'd finally gone down for a nap. I didn't mean to listen. I really didn't. But as I stepped through the sliding door, I heard Malia's voice float in from the kitchen. "I still haven't told him," she said. Yara's voice followed, low and sharp. "You serious? Still?" "Malia, the wedding is in 2 weeks." I froze. My hand was still on the doorknob. "I know," Malia sighed. "But what's the point now?" There was silence, then Yara again. "Malia, you have to. He thinks Caleb is his." My chest tightened. I wasn't breathing. Malia spoke again, softer this time. "He never asked." That hit like a punch. "What does that mean?" Yara asked. "It means he never asked. Not once. Not if I was seeing someone else around that time. Not if there was a chance. He just assumed. He chose this life." My hands were shaking. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to stay quiet. Yara didn't let up. "Malia, you're lying to him by omission. That's not fair. He's going to marry you. He's raising Caleb like his own. And he's doing a damn good job," Malia said, her voice cracking. "He loves that boy. Honestly, Leon's the only stable thing Caleb has. Which is exactly why he deserves to know the truth," Yara said. "You think he won't find out eventually?" Malia didn't answer. That silence was worse than anything she could have said. I backed away from the door slowly, trying not to make a sound. My mind was racing, heart pounding so loud I swore they'd hear it through the walls. Back in our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the floor. My ears were ringing. I tried to convince myself I misunderstood, that I missed context, that it was about something else. But I knew what I heard. She'd let me believe. For over a year, she let me pour myself into a child she knew might not be mine. And the worst part wasn't just the lie. It was that she didn't plan to tell me. Ever. I looked at our dresser, photos of Caleb in little frames, Malia's sonogram taped to the mirror, all these memories that suddenly felt like props in someone else's play. That night, I smiled like nothing was wrong, played with Caleb, kissed Malia on the forehead. I even asked Yara how her flight was. But something had broken, and I didn't know if it could be fixed. I waited 3 days before doing anything. 3 days of pretending. 3 days of watching Malia hold our son, my son. I had to remind myself, and wondering if it had all been fake. I'd never been good at pretending, but somehow I smiled, cooked dinner, folded laundry, played peekaboo with Caleb, and kissed Malia goodnight without giving anything away. But inside, I was unraveling. The morning after I overheard her conversation with Yara, I called a private lab from my car in the grocery store parking lot. I told them I wanted a paternity test. Quiet. No questions asked. They explained the process. I'd need to collect a DNA swab from the child and one from myself. I lied and said it was for peace of mind. I couldn't believe I was doing it. That I had to. That night, after Malia went to bed early with a headache, I sat with Caleb on the couch and read him his favorite book about a talking elephant. He giggled in my lap, grabbing at the pages like he always did. God, he was perfect. My throat burned as I swabbed the inside of his cheek while he yawned. It felt like betrayal, like I was the one doing something wrong. But I had to know. The days waiting for the results were the longest of my life. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep. Every time Malia touched my arm or smiled at me, I wanted to scream. I kept hearing her voice, he never asked, over and over in my head like a scratched record. When the email came in, I was sitting in the kitchen while Malia changed Caleb's diaper in the nursery. The subject line was simple: your results are ready. I opened it. 99.9% probability that I was not the biological father. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words didn't sink in right away. They looked fake, like someone had mocked up a cruel joke and emailed it to me. But it was real. I heard Malia humming down the hallway. I stood up slowly, walked to the drawer where we kept the stamps and paperwork, and slid the results inside. I didn't say a word. The next morning, I laid the sealed envelope on the kitchen counter. Malia was in her robe, holding her coffee mug, hair still damp from the shower. She looked peaceful, trusting. I pushed the envelope toward her and said nothing. She looked down, confused, then opened it. The second her eyes scanned the page, her shoulders dropped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Leon. I held up a hand. She started crying immediately. I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how. I didn't know. You were never going to tell me, I said quietly. You said it yourself. No, that's not what I meant. You let me fall in love with him. You let me build a life with both of you on a lie. I thought you wouldn't stay, she whispered. I stayed when I thought he was mine, I said. You didn't even give me a chance to make a choice. Caleb babbled in the background from his high chair. Malia's tears came harder. Please, she said, stepping toward me. Please don't leave. But I had already made my decision. I walked down the hall, grabbed the bag I had packed the night before, and came back out. You need to go, I said. Take Caleb. Stay with Yara, your brother, whoever. Just not here. She stared at me, shaking. You don't mean this. You love him. I do, I said, and my voice cracked. Which is why this hurts more than anything else in my life. She stood there for another second like she might say something else, then turned and went to get their things. When the door shut behind them, the silence in the house was suffocating. I sat down at the table and stared at the envelope again. I thought I'd feel relieved knowing the truth, but all I felt was hollow. Malia was gone less than a week before the paperwork arrived. I came home from work one night and found a thick envelope sticking out of my mailbox. The return address was a law office I didn't recognize. I opened it at the kitchen counter, still in my jacket, thinking maybe it was some legal formality about the canceled wedding. Instead, it was a court summons. Malia was suing me for child support. I read the documents 3 times, heart pounding harder with each pass. She claimed I was the legal father, that I had acted in loco parentis, a phrase I hadn't heard since college, and that removing my support would disrupt Caleb's emotional stability. The filing included photos of us as a family, screenshots of my social media posts, and a copy of the birth certificate. My name was on it. I had signed it at the hospital without a second thought. She told me I was the father. There hadn't been a doubt in my mind. I sat down on the couch, still holding the paper in both hands. The betrayal hadn't even cooled yet, and now this? The next morning, I called the only lawyer I trusted, Brandon, an old friend from college who specialized in family law. He came over that evening, read through the documents quietly, then said, "It's going to be a fight. You're telling me there's a chance they'll make me pay child support, even though I'm not his father?" He nodded grimly. "Depends on the judge. Some states care more about emotional bonds and what's in the best interest of the child than biology. You're listed as the father. You've acted as the father. That can weigh heavily." I felt sick. "This is insane," I muttered. "She lied. I was deceived." "And that's your angle," Brandon said. "We file a motion to disestablish paternity. DNA test, sworn statements, all of it. But it won't be quick." Court day came fast. Malia sat across the room, dressed like she was attending a funeral, eyes rimmed red. She didn't look at me. Her lawyer argued that I was the only father Caleb had ever known, that removing support would cause undue harm to the child, that I had been present, active, responsible, essentially the blueprint of a dad. My lawyer argued deception, that I had been misled, tricked into a role I would have never taken had I known the truth. The judge listened, expression unreadable. Then he ruled. Support would remain in place, at least for now. The emotional stability of the child came first. My bond with Caleb was seen as voluntary. My signature on the birth certificate, binding. I barely heard the rest. I sat there, jaw clenched, while the judge moved on to the next case. Outside the courthouse, Brandon shook his head. "This isn't over. We're appealing. We'll file everything: DNA, fraud claims, intent to deceive." I nodded numbly. Malia walked past us with her attorney. She looked at me, just for a second, and I saw no victory in her face. Just guilt. Or maybe shame. But it didn't matter. She had made her choice. And now I had to fight for mine. Back home, I took the framed photo of the three of us off the wall, set it face down in a drawer. I didn't know how long the legal battle would take, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to pay for a lie. Brandon got to work immediately after the ruling. He filed a motion to disestablish paternity within 48 hours. We submitted the DNA test, copies of texts, even a sworn statement from Yara confirming that Malia had known all along the child wasn't mine, and chose not to tell me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming the truth. The process dragged on for months. Court dates, paperwork, countermotions. Every time I thought we were close to resolution, something else came up. Malia's attorney argued I was the only father Caleb had ever known, that cutting me off would do more harm than good. They said I was trying to abandon a child I'd voluntarily raised. Brandon was relentless. "We're not letting them twist this. You were deceived." Plain and simple. In the middle of it all, I started dreaming about Caleb. He'd be standing in our old backyard, arms outstretched, calling me Dada. I'd wake up and stare at the ceiling, the silence unbearable. Sometimes I missed him so much it made me nauseous. Not Malia, her. I couldn't even think about without feeling rage. But the kid? The baby who used to wrap his tiny fingers around mine and fall asleep on my chest? Letting him go was the hardest part. But I had to. At the final hearing, Brandon stood up, calm and steady. He laid everything out: the DNA results, the timeline, the birth certificate signed under false belief, the testimony. He explained how deception wasn't just emotional, it had legal consequences. He used phrases like fraudulent inducement and lack of informed consent. The judge sat quietly for a long time after that. He asked a few questions, mostly about timing. Then he turned to Malia and asked the one thing that made the whole room go still. "Did you know there was a possibility Mr. Carter wasn't the biological father when you allowed him to sign the birth certificate?" She hesitated, blinked, then whispered, "Yes." The courtroom was dead silent. With a slow nod, the judge leaned back. "I find sufficient grounds to grant the motion to disestablish paternity. Mr. Carter is no longer the legal father of the child." My knees almost buckled. That was it. No more support. No more court dates. No more lies tied to my name. As we left the courthouse, Brandon clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You're free, man. Free." I sat in my car for 20 minutes before starting the engine. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just stared at my hands that used to rock Caleb to sleep, feed him, clean up after his messes, and wondered how something that felt so real could vanish like smoke. I drove home with the windows down. The wind was sharp, but it felt good. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. Just silence, heavy and hollow, and the kind of heartbreak you don't know how to explain to anyone. A week after the ruling, I sat across from Brandon in his office, watching him scroll through a few final documents on his screen. "So," I said, voice low, "what's next? Can I sue her for damages?" Brandon leaned back and rubbed his temples. He looked like he'd already had this conversation in his head before I even asked. "I wish I had better news, Leon," he said. "But emotional betrayal isn't considered compensable in our jurisdiction. Not unless there's measurable financial loss with a direct legal connection to fraud." I stared at him. She tricked me into raising a child that wasn't mine. Lied. Cost me time, money, everything, and there's nothing I can do. He nodded slowly. "Morally? You're right. Legally? Not so much. Paternity fraud isn't recognized as a criminal offense here. Civil suits have been attempted in other states, but they almost never stick. I sat back in the chair, trying to process it. So that's it. She gets to walk away like nothing happened. Brandon sighed. You got your name off the birth certificate. That's more than a lot of guys in your situation get. But there's no accountability, I said. No consequences. He closed his laptop. You're not wrong. But you're not going to get restitution, Leon. Not from the courts. If you want closure, it's going to have to come from somewhere else. I didn't say anything for a while. Just nodded, thanked him, and left. The ride home felt long even though it was only 20 minutes. The anger didn't burn as hot anymore. It had cooled into something else, dull, tired, constant. Like a muscle that had been clenched for too long and no longer remembered how to relax. That night, I pulled out the old box of Caleb's things from the hall closet. A tiny blue hat from the hospital. A stuffed giraffe I bought at 3 in the morning because I thought it might help him sleep. A picture Malia snapped of me holding him while he drooled on my shirt. I stared at that one the longest. It hit me then, really hit me, that I would never see him again. No more bedtime stories. No more dada. I had fought so hard to protect myself, to escape the trap I'd been dragged into. And I had. But nothing the court could rule would change the fact that I had loved that boy like he was mine. And now he was gone. The law had untangled the paperwork, cleared my name, cut the ties. But it couldn't touch the memories. Couldn't erase the ache. Couldn't force Malia to care, to apologize, or to understand what she'd taken from me. That's what nobody tells you. That sometimes justice feels like a hollow victory. Because the law can fix legal mistakes, but it can't fix the human ones. And it sure as hell can't fix a broken heart. The night I deleted everything, it was quiet. Too quiet. I'd come home from work, ignored the pile of dishes in the sink, and sat at my desk with my old external hard drive plugged in. Photos, videos, texts, every little digital trace of Malia and Caleb lived there. I had been holding on to it, telling myself I needed time. That one day I'd want to remember the good parts. But now, I just wanted it gone. I opened the family folder. First up, Caleb's first birthday. Frosting on his nose. Malia's laugh in the background. I hovered over the delete button for a while. And then I clicked it. I moved through everything methodically. The sonogram photos. The video of his first steps. That random Tuesday night when he danced to a cereal commercial, wearing nothing but a diaper and my socks. Gone. All of it. Last to go was the voice memo Malia left me the night we got engaged. I didn't even listen to it. Just dragged it to the trash and emptied it without blinking. I shut the laptop and stared at the wall. The silence felt different now. Not empty, just clean. A week later, I packed a bag and drove to a rental cabin in the Cascade Mountains. No cell service. No schedule. Just trees, cold air, and time. I needed something closure, I guess. Not from her. From myself. The cabin was small but comfortable. A fireplace, a couch, a desk. I didn't bring much, just a camera and my laptop. One night, I set it up on the desk and hit record. I didn't have a script. I just started talking. Hey, I said, my voice low. I don't know if anyone will ever see this. That's not really the point. I looked into the lens and told the whole story. Everything from the night Malia showed up out of nowhere, to the court ruling, to the realization that love doesn't always come with honesty. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just told the truth. And at the end, I said, if you're watching this because you're going through something similar, just know this. You deserve the truth. Love isn't supposed to come with secrets. And if someone can lie to you about something that big, they were never really choosing you to begin with. I sat in silence for a moment, then leaned forward and clicked stop. I never uploaded it. That wasn't the point. I saved it to a flash drive and tucked it in the drawer with my passport and other things I don't use often. That night, I sat by the fire with a blanket around my shoulders, sipping cheap whiskey and listening to the crackling logs. Outside, snow started falling, silent and steady. I closed my eyes and let the warmth wrap around me. The next day, I drove back home. I didn't feel healed. Not completely. But I wasn't angry anymore. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel lost either. Just a little more sure of who I was, who I still was, even after everything. Not a fool. Not a father. Just a man who had learned the hard way that truth matters more than love. And sometimes, the only peace you get is the one you give yourself.